Hey guys, Harv here, and welcome back to the Kerbal space program. In this episode, we're going to take something a slight bit out of the ordinary to the moon and back. So, you'll remember in a recent test pilot, I featured a ship called Not Because It Is Easy. And it certainly wasn't easy. In fact, it was so hard that we didn't actually manage to successfully complete the mission. The mission, as you'll see us fly it here, was a successful one-man Apollo. One-man Apollo. One-man Apollo to the moon back, which basically just entails sending a ship that's composed of a command module and a lander into moon orbit, getting into the lander, going down, coming back up, getting back into the command module and returning home. That's pretty much all it is. There's some nice camera angles I've got going on here. Orbital view basically works like chase view for the ascent for some reason. So we actually get to see it from one fixed position. I quite like that. I think I might carry on flying like that. It gives you a real sense of speed for some reason. But yes, that's what we're doing here. Now if we separate, just watch the escape tower at the top. Watch the top of the ship. You'll see, bam! Flies away. I like that a lot. That was one of the problems I found with the test pilot ship, is that the staging wasn't perfect. It relied, flying the entire ship relied an awful lot on action groups and knowledge of what the action groups do. I've tried to limit that. I have to give a lot of credit to Alan Schrader, that was his name I believe. I have to give a lot of credit to Alan for the inspiration for this rocket, because you'll see a lot of it is pretty much exactly the same. At least in concept. What I've tried to change about it is to rely less on action groups, so I've trimmed it down to only 3 usable action groups. That includes the abort, which we'll see at the end of the video. That includes turning off gimbaling for the engines, which he didn't have, and it's just my personal preference. And finally, getting rid manually of the escape tower. Even though I already have incorporated that into the staging, I thought it might be a safe backup to have it manually. So, you can see the ship is quite minimalistic. In order for it to have the best chance of succeeding, we're going to have to put it into a lower orbit than I would do usually. My standard orbital height is about 120 kilometers. So I'm going to get into a 100-kilometer orbit. It's actually 106 at one side due to inaccuracy on my part, but it doesn't really matter. And in fact, the mission does extremely well. I don't want to spoil it, so I guess I'll just commentate the here and now rather than talking about the future. But there we go, we've set up our flight planning just to give us one single continuous burn as a bit of a guide on how to get into orbit. It's not really useful, so I just got rid of it right then. Try as I might, I can't bring myself to rely on the flight planning too much. I don't think I should have to, really. I had a lot of people screaming at me in the comments of a recent video, saying, why don't you use flight planning? It's just not necessary. For interplanetary burns, it is absolutely brilliant. For burns when you need to be able to look at your ship, it is absolutely brilliant. But anyway, for everything else, it's a bit pointless. What we're doing now, we've separated the command module from the lander and the translunar injection stage. And we're slamming back into that, which is a shame. But basically, we're trying to turn it 180 degrees and dock. And it's actually pretty hilarious how it's just tumbling and smashing apart. This is not what you would see in real life. Certainly not. Way too dangerous. We probably just smashed the docking port into unusability with that. But there we go. So what we do, you'll see there's a probe on this lander, which is a bit of a waste of weight, but its usefulness outweighs the inaccessibility, the problems it causes, because it allows us to pilot the lander unmanned, so we can actually leave our person in the command module and just RCS our way back to docking with it. And there we go, simple as that. The reason I'm not doing this on the way to the moon is because we actually don't have enough fuel in this lunar injection stage to get us all the way there. We're going to have to rely on the command module a little bit. And there we go, the docking is finally successful. That wobbling, it seems really haphazard. I have to say, the beauty of the Kerbal space program is not in its refined, elegant designs, but it's just in the random squabblings of two ships trying to dock. Yeah. But yeah, we don't have enough fuel in this particular stage we're using now to actually get us all the way to the moon. So we have turned our command module around, we've docked it nose to nose with the lander, and we're preparing for our burn. Now what I'm doing is sorting out the staging so that when we do actually run out of fuel, we can immediately separate, spin around, and start using the command module engines as soon as possible. So there's hardly any break in between the burning and the non-burning. So we'll just move our ship around. I've decided to put it into a polar direction, just so we can be quick to respond whenever the moon decides to show its face, and get it pointing northwards, start going around the planet, and lo and behold, it is immediate. I didn't realise how close I'd got it, so yeah, quickly turn back, prograde, point towards our velocity vector, and we can start burning. Very nice indeed. This will get us, this will do probably most of the burn, I'm not entirely sure. Again, not using the flight planning, because even though I have to look at my ship, actually this would have been the perfect time to use it, and yes I didn't, because I didn't need it. But yeah, because now I'm looking at the ship, and in 3, 2, 1, the engines are going to cut out. There we go. We're going to separate that. We're going to desperately turn around. Having this camera angle was a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea. And we're going to start up the next engine. There we go. Now that, because this is sped up to 2 times speed, you probably didn't notice everything there. What happened was we detached the stage, we started spinning round, transferred our point of view towards the command module command pod, and we started up the engine all while spinning, and we overjudged it a little but managed to correct. So we're back on course. Yeah, using flight planning then would have been useful, but it didn't destroy the mission, it didn't ruin anything, it didn't even make us come close to failure. That's how smooth this mission went. So we get our sphere of influence capture, and we're actually going to go for an unusually low orbit, partly because, hey, it looks cool, but also because it gives our lander a lot of leeway, makes it a lot easier to land. Rather than the stress of coming flying down, we have a far more... Our vertical speed is a lot less than our horizontal speed when we come in for landing, but we'll see that later. So we're warping round, we're getting there. I have to say, I'm glad I have Jebediah on this mission, because going into such a low orbit for this is probably not wise. But he is the thrill master, he is the one to do it. So we're going to warp in, just try and get closer to our periapsis. There we go, starting the warp. And we'll get closer, but not directly to it, because I want to lower it down past 50, all the way down to 20 kilometers above the surface. Ludicrous, I know. But it's pretty cool, I like it. So we'll come in, and as soon as we probably should have waited a bit closer. I kind of waste a lot of time fixating on getting our periapsis above 20 kilometers, because I think if you're above 20 you can warp at times 50 as your maximum time acceleration, which is useful to have a higher rate of time acceleration, but it's not really necessary, and I spend a while trying to sort out inclination and that. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure what I was trying to do here actually with the inclination. It seems we're going a bit northward at the moment, so I was thinking, okay, well if we're going a bit northward we need to burn southward surely. So which way is southward? And if I incorporate that into this burn I can save time, and just, yeah, things going through my head, conflicting ideas. But anyway, our periapsis is above 20 kilometers, so that's fine, and we are burning pretty much retrograde. There we go, we are now in orbit around the moon. We just need to circularize at 20 kilometers. Bringing it down, pretty easy. I have to say, this mission, I say that a lot, don't I? I have to say an awful lot. This mission's pretty easy in the elements that we are used to. If you played the game for any reasonable amount of time, then you'll have gone to the moon and back, and you'll probably done it a fair amount of time. A fair many times. Why can't I say that sentence? It's really weird. Happens sometimes to me. I don't know. But yeah, you'll probably have done this fair few times. A fair few times, that's it. A fair few times. Ah, God. So you'll be familiar with all these different maneuvers, like getting into orbit. That's orbital insertion. And, you know, transferring to the moon and whatnot. what makes this fun for people in that situation is all the spinning around and docking and separating a lander and going back up and stuff, and it's the added complexity, but not necessarily, no, not necessarily challenge, not necessarily. But there we go, we're in pretty much a 20-kilometer orbit above the surface of the moon. And we're on the dark side, which means we'll shortly be going round to the light side of the moon. The dark side of the moon. So what we're doing is we're pointing in a particular direction, and we're going to just for the preparation, we'll just warp around even more, make sure that we are going to absolutely land on the light side of the moon. And what are we going to do now? Well, first things first, we need to actually get into the lander, so we can EVA Jebediah Kerbin here, swap him over and get him into our lander, which is pretty interestingly designed. It's actually landing on the fuel tank, and it's using 2 radial engines, the smaller but not incredibly small ones. So there we go, we've undocked, we have completely full fuel in this case, and we can just point ourselves retrograde and slow down, try and decelerate from an orbit to a, well, pretty much to a crash trajectory actually. There we go, burning. I do like these engines actually. Never really considered them before now, but it was again from the, not because of this easy test pilots that they came to my attention. But yeah, by using them on the side, despite the fact they have, well, they actually have a remarkably high ISP. What's that stand for again? ISP. I can't remember. Damn, I need to remember that. I can't remember what ISP stands for. Basically, they are fairly surprisingly efficient, but they're not as efficient. And the reason we're using them is to try and cut out the weight of landing legs. They're not a massive deal, but it's still, you know, any weight you can trim off is good weight. Or is bad weight if you can get rid of it and you decide not to. But there we go. Coming down, really easy. We have plenty of thrust in these 2 engines. Look how small the ship is. It's kind of hard to see the perspective when we get so used to looking at it, but as we land with a gentle touchdown or a bit of a roll, oh, and you can actually spin around because we're not on landing legs, like this. But you can actually see, if we get out and EVA Jebediah Kerbin onto the surface of the moon, this lander is so small, ridiculously small in fact, look at it. Just take a look at that. It's about twice, maybe 3 times its height. And that's not even the landing part. That's a lot of that is made up from the probe, which is rather necessary. It is rather necessary indeed. So, I think we've had enough time on the lunar surface. We can get back in, and now all we need to do is look for our space station. No, it's not a space station. It's a command module, damn you. Why did I say space station? In the interests of rambling, of course, trying to keep the flow of the commentary going. We'll warp round until it's nearly above us. Again, like I said in the previous video, there's no official time when to burn. It's just when it looks about right. I haven't done the calculations for this, it's just eyeing it up. Oh, and by the way, the diamond marker is back, because if you press F4, as I was kindly told in the comments, thank you very much for the help, if you press F4, you can actually enable it again. So for some reason it's automatically disabled, I guess. Not entirely sure what the reasoning behind that is, but hey-o, we'll go with it. So yeah, we get our intersection, and it looks pretty good actually. We come within like 3 kilometers, which is very, very good for our first ascent. But it's a problem, because it is the first ascent, and what we forget to realise is that on the first ascent you are not nearly going fast enough to meet up with your target craft. You can see the relative velocity above the navball there. 146. Now, actually what's happened right now as well, which doesn't help matters, is that we've run out of liquid fuel. If you look there at the resources tab in the top right, we have no liquid fuel. This is where the RCS comes into play. If I was just doing it for docking means, then I wouldn't have brought a whole tank. I would have brought on maybe a couple of radial ones. But no, we need it, because this is rather important, and in fact we probably don't even need that much. We'll find out later how much we are left with, but we need to use RCS now to get ourselves into an orbit, to get closer to our target command module, and to dock with our target command module. And we might even need it to help out later on. I guess we'll wait and see. But yeah, on the first ascent, you're not going fast enough. You need to get into an actual orbit, or at least very close to orbital speeds, before you can even dream of coming close. And it turns out we actually burnt a little too early, we're actually ahead of it. So we need to burn prograde some more, get our apoapsis up, until we get a pretty close intersection on our intersect 2. 0.5 kilometers, just 500 meters away at that point. That seems like a pretty good bet to go for. So we'll warp round to that. What is our RCS levels actually? I'm quite interested to know that now, because RCS is pretty still overpowered. It was rebalanced for 0.18, 0.2, but not really enough. Oh, I don't know. I really don't know. I think what we should do actually is find out how real reaction control systems, what quantities they're used on actual space stations and actual ships, and how big a role do they actually play in a proper mission. I'm pretty certain that they won't be used to get a crew home, like we did in that test pilot. But maybe for close-up docking, certainly for last stages of docking, it'll absolutely be used. You can't dock using main engines, or can you? That's something I've actually done beforehand. I have docked using entirely an LV-909 engine and nothing else. It was hard work, I can tell you that. It took so long, but yeah. I expect I'll be able to do it significantly faster very soon. Or with the training and with the practice I've had recently. But anyway, we're coming in close for our final docking procedure. We want to get our yellow marker, which is prograde, to hover directly over our pink or purple marker, which is pointing towards the target's docking port. And this means our velocity vector is marked by the yellow marker, so this means we'll be travelling directly towards it. And as you can see, we can take off RCS and SAS, and we'll have a direct contact with it. The magnetization of the docking ports is so very useful. So ridiculously useful. Very helpful. And there we are. Now. How much fuel do we have left in the command module? Looking at the scale down there, it seems we have about a third. We can get Jebediah Kerbin back out, get him back into the command module. And it seems we have a third of our fuel left. Now, what would be a sensible thing to do? To give this mission the best chance of succeeding, should we perhaps get rid of the lander, get rid of excess weight, and carry on using just the command module fuel? Maybe, that sounds quite logical, but then again, the lander has the only source of RCS fuel, and as we've said, RCS is pretty imbalanced, it's pretty overpowered. Maybe we can resort to using RCS to carry on with our burn, to try and help us. Do we need to? Do we not? In fact, the answer is no to both of them. If we actually take the lander with us, we even carrying all that extra mass, we still don't have to resort to RCS. This mission is an absolute success. Absolutely. We can use entirely liquid fuel to get us back down, to get out of to reach escape velocity from the moon, and to lower our Kerbin periapsis down deep enough into the atmosphere that we can slow down to a halt and open up our parachutes and safely land. Yes, we can make sure our trajectory is correct, and yeah, without using any RCS fuel whatsoever, and we still have absolutely loads left. Looking at the resources tab, if we can look at the resources tab, I'm not sure how much is left, certainly. Maybe in future evolutions of the design, to slim it down even more, we can just use radial RCS tanks rather than the actual full-sized 1 meter tank. But there we go, we can get rid of that command module stage, and we are just left with the lander and the command pod. Now what we probably should have done is transfer that remaining fuel into the lander, just in case. Perhaps we could have used the radial engines as retrograde burners, but at the end of the day, we have 2 parachutes on the side, so let's do the crazy. Instead of just landing the command pod, whilst we have no heat problems to deal with, we're going to land the entire thing. Because ships don't burn up in the atmosphere, and actually having the extra parts probably gives us more drag, which will actually slow us down more in the long term. Perhaps increasing the chances of this mission being a success. I really enjoyed this. I have to say, I absolutely enjoyed it 100%. It was such a good mission. Nothing went wrong, we landed a person on the moon, and we demonstrated an awful lot of capabilities, certainly. Very good. A lot of fun. It is probably one of my favourite missions I would recommend. Perhaps to the new players who are looking to get more sophistication. But there we go, a successful landing despite the explosions. Right, now that I've shown you the one-man Apollo mission successfully flying, I want to show you it successfully aborting, just quickly before we end the video. So we go down to our one-man Apollo. 65 parts! 65! This is why I'm so proud of it. It's so minimalistic, somehow. And it shouldn't be, it works for some reason. It's largely due to this bottom stage. Now, what happens if this bottom stage doesn't perform as it should do? To emulate something going wrong with the engines, we're going to make sure that as soon as we launch these two engines, so that engine, no, that engine and that engine, are both out of service, so that the whole thing should start careening wildly in one direction. And we're going to see how our sabotage seems to hold up and how well we can successfully abort from this. Not going to save it, I don't want to accidentally keep it like this. Just go straight to the launch pad. And this is where the escape tower comes into play. You saw it shooting off at the start of this video. Oh, not quite at the start, you know, at the point in the orbit where it did shoot off, but we're going to show it, instead of detaching from the command module, it's going to pull the command module away from the wreckage, or away from what is soon going to be an awful lot of wreckage. Alright, so we're on the launch pad. We'll just warp it to daytime so we can actually see what's going on. Oh, no, I don't want a physics warp. That's not the idea. Give me time warp. There we go. Time acceleration. Right, there we go. Sufficient sunlight, I think. Right, and we shall, first we'll just start ascending. Now, so if the engines were to cut out, say like this, what we'll do is abort, and this will pull the command module away, and then we press 0, and it opens the parachutes. And that is one of the successful aborts. Jebediah Kerbin looks very happy about that. Let's go again and see if we can get it to happen in a slightly different way. Just before we end this video, I really enjoyed this mission. I really do recommend this mission. I'll probably put the craft file for this ship in the description, just in case, because it was fairly hard to build. It took a significant amount of testing to get it as good as this, I have to admit. Alright, so this time, from launch, those engines will be deactivated. There we go. Quickly abort. There we go. And now open parachutes. Like so. Very nice. No matter how much I've stress tested the design, it seems to hold up pretty well in every single circumstance, which I'm very happy about. So it kind of proves it is quite a solid design. So guys, if you liked the video, then please do like the video. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you all next time.